Hello, today we are going to take some notes over fractions, decimals, and percents. The notes are quite lengthy if you were not in class, so I am not going to go through all of these, but I will go through enough to where you should start to understand. On the first section, we are turning these decimals into fractions. And just make sure that you always know that fractions should be in simplest form. So for number 1, you're going to say the decimal using place value. So number 1 says 6/10, and so that is what we write, 6/10, and then you will simplify that fraction. So 6/10 will turn into 3/5. On number 2, we would say 685 thousandths, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So we would write 685 over 1,000. And then you would simplify. Okay, I know that 5 would go into both numbers evenly. So we can start with 5. 685 divided by 5 is 137. And 1,000 divided by 5 is 200, and that actually would be simplest form. And then the last one, we would say 44 hundredths. So we would write 44 over 100, and then we would simplify and get 11/25. Okay, on the next section, we are going to turn the fraction into decimals. Okay, so number 4 says 7/10. You should know how to write 7/10. That would just be 0.7 or 0.7. Okay, on the next one, 2/5. Okay, this one, since we have a denominator of 5, we could make this out of tenths. To get from 5 to 10, we would multiply by 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So 2/5 is the same as 4/10. Now I could write 4/10 as a decimal, 0.4. So what you're trying to do here is make that denominator out of tenths or hundredths. Number 6, I can make 17/20 out of 100. Multiply by 5. 17 times 5 is 85. And then to write this, I would write 85 hundredths is 0.85. Okay. On the next one, 2/25, I can make this out of hundredths by multiplying by 4. And 8 hundredths is 0.08. Make sure you don't write 0.8 because that is 8/10, not 8 hundredths. Okay, so I'm going to skip number 8 and 9. Number 8 you would make out of hundredths and multiply by 2. And number 9 you would make it out of hundredths and multiply by 5. Okay, so what if the fraction does not have a denominator that would go into tenths or hundredths like it did for numbers 4 through 9? Okay, so 5 through 8, again, I can't get it to go to tenths or hundredths. So if I need this to be a decimal, remember that this fraction bar is also a division bar. So you'll do 5 divided by 8 to get your decimal. Remember, the first number always goes on the inside. So 8 does not go into 5. Add a decimal and a 0. 8 into 50 would go 6 times, which is 48. Subtracting, get 2. Add a 0, bring it down. 8 into 20 goes twice, which is 16. Subtracting, get 4. Add another 0 and bring it down. And 8 into 40 would go 5 times evenly. Don't forget to bring your decimal straight up. So our decimal, 5/8, is 0.625 or 625 thousandths. Okay, same thing with number 11, a 1/3. You would do 1 divided by 3, and it does not go in, so we're going to add a decimal and a 0. 3 into 10 goes 3 times, which is 9. Subtracting it 1, add a 0. 3 into 10 goes 3 times, which is 9. Subtracting it 1, add a 0. So this one obviously will not come out. It's going to be a repeating decimal. And you guys hopefully know by now that 1/3 is repeating decimal. And if you don't, we're going to do it enough where you'll start to memorize that it's 0.3 repeating. You need that bar over the 3 to show that it's repeating. Okay, and you're going to do the same for 12, 11 divided by 15. The same for 13, 13 divided by 16 to get your decimal. When you have a mixed number, you have 2 options. You can leave your whole number alone and just do 1 divided by 8. Okay. 8 into 10 goes once. 8 into 20 goes twice. And 8 into 40 goes 5 times. Bring your decimal straight up. So 1/8 is 0.25. 5 and 1/8 would be 5.125. So you can add that whole number in at the end, or we can change 5 and 1/8 into a mixed number. 8 times 5 is 40, plus 1 is 41/8. And then do 41 divided by 8. You're going to get the same answer. It goes in 5 times. And then keep dividing. We get 5.125. Okay, so either way, you can do 1 divided by 8, put the whole number in at the end, or change it into a mixed number and divide. Same thing with 17/8. You can start by doing 17 divided by 8, or you can change 17/8 into a mixed number, 2 and 1/8, and then do 1 divided by 8 and add your 2 at the end. Okay. Okay, now we're going to move on to turning decimals into percentages. There is a trick to this. To turn a decimal into a percent, you're going to move the decimal 2 times to the right. Okay, so 35 hundredths is what this says, 35 hundredths, which is 35%. So if you look at the decimal, it moved twice to the right. This next one says 2/10. Remember, percentages are always out of 100. You want 100% on your test. So if you make it out of 100, you're going to get 20 out of 100, which is 20%. Or move the decimal twice to the right, which is 20%. 18 hundredths, again, move it twice to the right, we get 18%. Okay. Okay. Now fractions to a percent. Again, fractions are always, or percentages are always out of 100. So for 3/5, if we want to turn this fraction into a percent, we make it out of 100 times 20 gives us 60 out of 100. It wants it as a percent. Anything out of 100, your numerator is your percent, 60%. 19/20, again, we want to make it out of 100. So 95 out of 100 is 95%. What if the denominator can't go into 100, like 3/8? We will divide 3 divided by 8. So divide like you normally would. Bring that decimal up. And then we just said at the section above to change a decimal into a percent, there's a trick. You just move it twice to the right and put a percent sign on it. So 3/8 would be 37.5%. Okay. Let's look at number 20. If I had 2 and 87/100ths, think of one whole is 100%, so 2 wholes would be 200%. 87 out of 100 is 87%. Put them together, you get 287%. Okay. Same thing with number 21. You would do 13 divided by 15 to get your decimal, and then move it twice to the right to make it a percent. Okay. For number 22, I'll go ahead and do this one. One whole is 100%. To find 7/8 as a percent, I can just do 7 divided by 8. To get 0.875, but as a percent, that would be 87.5%, right? Move the decimal twice to the right and add those two percentages together. So I have 187.5%. So anytime you have a mixed number, obviously 1 and something or 2 and something, it's going to be over 100%. Okay. How would we do these? 3 is what percent of 8? That is saying the same thing as 3 is what percent of 8 is 3/8. So to turn that into a percent, you would change it into a decimal first. 3 divided by 8, which we've done this one on the page already. 3 divided by 8 is 0.375, which is 37.5%. Move it twice to the right. Okay. And then I do want to talk about these bottom 3 because these are a little bit harder. What would these be as a fraction? Now we have percentages and we want to go to a fraction. To do these, you first want to write them as decimals. So now we're going to do the opposite. 2 times to the left to go from a percent to a decimal. So you already see a decimal, but it's not a decimal yet. It's a percent right now. It's got the percent sign. So to write 0.2% as a decimal, you're going to move that decimal twice to the left. So that would say 0.002, which says 2 thousandths. So if something is 0.2%, that is very small. Tenths, hundred thousandths. That's 2 1,000ths. And then simplify. So 1/500th. Very small. What about 87.5%? Okay, again, move it twice to the left. That says 875 thousandths. We're trying to write these as fractions, right? And then you would divide. I'm pretty sure 25 goes into both of those. I'm going to use my calculator to save some time. We have 35 on top, and 1,000 divided by 25 is 40, and then that would simplify to 7/8 if you divide by 5 again. Okay. Last one, 225%. If you don't see the decimal, it's behind it. So if you move this twice to the left, we get 2 and 25/100ths, which is a mixed number, 2 and 25/100ths. So as a fraction, simplified would just be 2 and 1/4. Okay, feel free to go back and review those and do the ones that I skipped for practice. And I will see you soon.